Imagine being told that you will never walk. That the child everyone mocked, the boy they laughed at, the prince they called a curse, would one day rise from the dirt floor where he crawled and build the largest empire the African continent had ever seen. Not a myth, not a legend invented to comfort the weak. A man, a real man, made of flesh and pain and impossible will. His name was Sundiata Keita, and this is the story they were never going to tell you. To understand Sundiata, you first have to understand the world he was born into. It is the early 12th century, West Africa. The land known as the Sahel, that vast ancient stretch of savanna between the Sahara Desert and the forests of the south, is alive with kingdoms, trade routes, and power. Gold flows through these lands like rivers, salt is as precious as life itself, and the people of the Mandinka are one of the most proud, deeply rooted peoples on the continent. Their homeland is called Kangaba, a small but significant kingdom nestled along the upper Niger River. These are a people who keep their history alive through music and word, through storytellers called griots, men and women who memorize generations of truth and carry it in their voices like sacred fire. It is here, in this world of drums and dust and deep tradition, that our story begins. The king of Kangaba was a man named Nare Magan Konate, a ruler, a warrior, a father of many children. One evening, 2 hunters arrived at his court. They had traveled far. They carried with them a strange and specific message. They told the king that he must marry an ugly woman. Not a beautiful woman, not a woman of status or elegance, an ugly woman. And from this union would come a son who would make the Mandinka people the greatest in all the land. Now, most kings would have laughed at such a message, sent those hunters away. But Nare Magan Konate listened. Not long after, a woman arrived at his kingdom. Her name was Sogolon Konde. She was hunched. Her eyes were unusual. Her appearance made people look away. The courtiers whispered. The other wives sneered. But the king remembered the prophecy, and he took Sogolon as his wife. What happened next, no one in that kingdom could have been prepared for. In the year 1217, Sogolon gave birth to a son. They named him Sundiata. And from the very beginning, something was wrong. The boy could not walk. His legs were like cloth beneath him, useless, heavy, unresponsive. While other children of the palace ran and played and grew strong, Sundiata crawled. Year after year, he crawled. The whispers grew louder. This was the great one the hunters had promised, this broken child, this boy who dragged himself across the dirt. His half-brothers mocked him, courtiers pitied him with their eyes and laughed at him with their mouths, and the other wives of the king, they made sure Sogolon felt every drop of that humiliation. There is a particular kind of pain that only a mother knows. The pain of watching your child suffer while the world decides he is nothing. Sogolon endured it in silence, but inside, she never stopped believing. Then the king died, and what little protection Sundiata and his mother had was gone. The throne passed to Sundiata's older half-brother, Denkaran Tuman. His mother, Sasuma Berete, was a woman who had spent years waiting for this moment. And now that she had power, she intended to use it. The humiliation became daily, deliberate, calculated, cruel. Sasuma once sent her servants to Sogolon's hut with a handful of baobab leaves, the kind used to season food, not as a gift, as a statement. Your crippled son cannot even fetch leaves for his own mother's pot. And Sogolon went home and wept. She wept in front of her son, and Sundiata saw his mother's tears. He did not speak, he did not shout. He simply looked at the iron rod used to stoke the fire.
then reached out and wrapped his hands around it. The servants watched. The courtiers who had gathered to mock went quiet. With arms that had spent years carrying the weight his legs refused to bear, Sundiata pushed. The iron rod bent under the force of his grip, and for the first time in his life, Sundiata Keita stood up. He did not just stand, he walked. Then he walked to the baobab tree in the courtyard, and he tore it from the ground with his bare hands, and he lay it at his mother's feet. From this day forward, the story says he told her, you will never want for baobab leaves again. He was 7 years old. You might think that moment changed everything. It did not. In fact, it made things worse. Because a crippled prince is a laughingstock, but a strong prince is a threat. Sasuma Berete saw what Sundiata had become, and fear replaced contempt. She plotted, she whispered to the king, she turned the court against Sogolon and her son. And so Sundiata and his mother were exiled. Driven from the only home they had ever known, cast out into the vast, indifferent wilderness of West Africa, with nothing but each other and whatever pride they could hold on to. They wandered, from kingdom to kingdom, court to court, always strangers, always guests who stayed just long enough to feel the growing edge of welcome wearing thin. But in those years of wandering, something extraordinary was happening. Sundiata was growing. Not just in body, though he grew tall and powerful and fierce. He was learning, watching how different kingdoms were governed, how alliances were broken and made, how leaders earned loyalty, how armies moved. He was also making friends, real ones, loyal ones, men who looked at this exiled prince and saw something that others had missed for years. Greatness. But while Sundiata wandered, the world he had left behind was being swallowed by darkness. In the north, a conqueror was rising. His name was Sumanguru Kante, king of the Soso people, a warrior of terrifying reputation, a man who wore armor from human skin and kept the heads of kings as trophies. The stories told of Sumanguru describe a man who practiced dark magic, who could disappear into thin air on a battlefield, who killed 11 kings before breakfast and made their sons his slaves. Whether all that is true, the fear was. And one by one, the kingdoms of West Africa fell before him, including Kangaba, the land of Sundiata's ancestors, the home he had been cast out of, the people who had mocked him, the kingdom that had broken his mother's heart. All of it, now under the boot of Sumanguru Kante. And then, it was messengers began to move across the continent, searching, asking, where is the son of Sogolon? Where is the exiled prince of Kangaba? Where is Sundiata Keita? Before we continue this story, if you've made it this far, you already know that what we do here is different. These are not textbook summaries. These are not Wikipedia recaps. These are the real stories. The ones buried, the ones erased, the ones that deserve to be told with the weight and the fire they were always meant to carry. If that means something to you, take just a moment right now and subscribe to Africa's Legends Untold. It costs you nothing, but it means everything for keeping these stories alive. Now, let's go back to the exiled prince, because the moment his people needed him most had finally arrived.
When the messengers finally found Sundiata, he was living in the court of the king of Mema. No longer a crawling child, no longer a broken exile. He was a man now, a commander of armies, a prince who had earned respect in a foreign land through sweat and strategy and sheer force of will. When they told him what had happened to his homeland, what Sumanguru Kante had done to his people, he was quiet for a long time. These were the same people who had mocked him, the same court that had exiled him, the same kingdom that had chosen his half-brother over him and thrown him and his mother into the wilderness. And yet, he said yes. Not for pride, not for revenge, for his people.
because that is the difference between a ruler and a king. A ruler governs the people he likes. A king serves the people who need him. Sundiata Keita began his march home, but first he had work to do. He understood something that no military mind before him in that region had fully grasped. Sumanguru Kante could not be defeated by one kingdom alone. He was too strong, too feared, too deeply rooted. But a coalition, a united front of every tribe, every clan, every people who had suffered under Sumanguru's reign, that was a different story. And so Sundiata did something remarkable. He traveled, he negotiated, he sat with chiefs and elders and warriors who had every reason not to trust each other. He convinced them, not through threats, not through bribery, through vision. He painted them a picture of what West Africa could become if they stood together, not as enemies, not as rivals, but as one people. One by one, they joined him. The Mandinka clans, the Bambara, the Fula, former enemies who buried old grievances under the weight of a shared enemy and the gravity of Sundiata's presence. By the time he was ready to face Sumanguru, he commanded an alliance the continent had never seen before.
The year is 1235. The two armies meet at a place called Kirina. On one side, Sumanguru Kante, the man who had terrorized a continent, whose reputation had made kings surrender before a single arrow was fired. On the other side, Sundiata Keita, the boy who couldn't walk, the prince who was exiled, the man who came back. What the griots tell us about this battle has been passed down for 8 centuries. They say Sumanguru was protected by powerful magic, that ordinary weapons could not pierce him, that arrows fell from his body like rain, that swords broke against him like clay. But Sundiata had listened carefully. He had gathered intelligence. He had found Sumanguru's weakness, buried deep in the Sorcerer King's own secret, a white rooster's spur. According to the legend, Sumanguru's power could be broken by an arrow tipped with the spur of a white rooster, the one thing his magic could not deflect. Whether this is metaphor or literal truth, what happened next is undisputed by history. Sundiata's archers loosed their arrows. The armies clashed with the force of a continent's rage. The dust rose so high it swallowed the sun. And then Sumanguru Kante fled. For the first time in his reign of terror, the man who had never been beaten turned and ran. He was chased into the hills of Kulekoro, and there he vanished. Some say he was killed. Some say the mountains swallowed him whole. Some say he simply ceased to exist, that a man whose entire power was built on fear had nothing left once the fear was gone. What we know is this: he never returned. And when the dust settled at Kirina, Sundiata Keita stood on a battlefield that had just changed the course of African history. What Sundiata built after Kirina was not just a kingdom. It was an empire, the Mali Empire. At its height, it stretched across 3 million square kilometers of West Africa. It controlled the gold and salt trade routes that connected the entire continent to the Mediterranean world. Cities like Niani, Timbuktu, and Djenné would grow into centers of learning and commerce that rivaled anything in Europe or Asia at the time. The wealth that flowed through this empire was so staggering that when Sundiata's successor, Mansa Musa, walked to Mecca 60 years later, he crashed the global gold market simply by being generous. That was the world Sundiata built. But perhaps more remarkable than the empire was how he governed it. Sundiata created something called the Gbara, a great assembly of clan leaders and elders who governed together. Not a dictatorship, not a monarchy of whims and cruelty. A system, a structure, a code. The Kurukan Fuga, the charter of the Mali Empire, is one of the earliest known constitutional documents in human history. It established rights, it protected women, it regulated trade, it outlawed the humiliation of others. 800 years before many modern constitutions were written, a man who had spent his childhood being humiliated built a civilization that made humiliation illegal. Let that settle for a moment.
There is a reason the griots of West Africa have told the story of Sundiata Keita for 800 years. Not because it is comfortable, not because it is easy, but because it is true. A boy who could not walk became the man a continent ran toward when it had nowhere else to turn. A prince, cast out in humiliation, returned to build a civilization that the world is still studying today. A child whose own people decided he was worthless chose to save those very people when they needed saving most. We live in a world that is very good at telling people what they cannot do, what they cannot become, where they cannot go, who they are not allowed to be. Sundiata Keita heard all of that. He heard it in the laughter of courtiers. He felt it in the dirt floor beneath his hands and knees. He carried it through years of exile and wandering and uncertainty. And then he stood up. Not just for himself, for every person who had ever been told they were not enough. For every mother who wept quietly because the world had decided her child was a burden. For every exile who looked back at the home that rejected them and wondered whether it was worth going back to save. He stood up for all of them. The lion of Mali, the boy who bent iron, the king who outlawed humiliation. Sundiata Keita. Remember his name. If his story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you want to know who we uncover next, subscribe to Africa's Legends Untold. Because this continent has more legends than history has pages, and we are just getting started.